on the power grab that took place at the hands of this administration, which I think you deserve a ton of credit for right off the bat.
I appreciate it.
This was in response to Texas drawing 4 districts at the behest of Donald Trump, the demand of Donald Trump. 5 districts that he felt he was entitled to. That's right. This past Tuesday, in Texas's primary elections, 4 of those districts had higher Democratic turnout than Republican turnout.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Did this whole effort backfire by Republicans? Was this a fool's errand by Republicans to have engaged in the first place?
It's still to be determined, but let's back up a little bit on this. You use the word entitled because that's exactly the word that Donald Trump used when he called Greg Abbott. He said, I'm entitled to 5 seats, which is remarkable and chilling just on its own. Then again, it's hardly surprising. This is a guy after January 6th, that day of love, tried to light democracy on fire, tried to steal the election. Democracy is for suckers, kind of the attitude. Then went down there, talking about finding 11, 12,000 votes down in Georgia. He knows, and I was with the speaker-to-be, Jeffries, an hour or 2 ago, he knows he's going to get shellacked in this election. He knows he's going to lose the midterm elections. So one thing we can all agree on, if we do our job. And that's why he went out and made that phone call to Greg Abbott to try to rig the election before 1 vote was cast. What typically is the case, and I say this with love and reverence to my party, our party, Democratic Party, so often our response to something like that would be to try to win an argument. To maybe go out, Brian, and we, work to maybe get an op-ed in the New York Times. Say, gosh darn it, this is so wrong.
Or maybe even a strongly worded letter.
Or maybe a strongly worded letter.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but.
And I'll be candid with you, that was kind of our inclination. I started with a tweet. I was very satisfied with myself. They said, we had 500 likes. I said, that's amazing. But it occurred to pretty much all of us, and Brian, you were a real vocal leader on this, all holding us to a higher level of expectation and accountability, because this time last year, not many of us were sure. I mean, we were hand-wringing, we were struggling in every way, shape, or form as a party to figure it out. We were still in this, are we really going to do a forensic, what the hell just happened? And there was a sense that we're just truly weak and ineffective, and we weren't able to get anything done. And I think it was in that stew that we decided to do something a little bit differently. But of course, that required a few phone calls, and the first and most important was to former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who did the impossible. She had just a matter of days. We had to do a special election in response to draw these new lines, and she went to the largest delegation in the country and remarkably got back a few hours later, said, let's do this. Of course, we didn't necessarily know how to do this, and we went through a process over a course quite literally of about 10 days in total, and put this on the ballot with a 90-day sprint, raised $118 million. And we not only drew the line, but we held the line and we pushed back and we fought fire with fire and we punched back at what happened in Texas. And Brian, the thing for me, it just, once a mind is stretched, it never goes back to its original form. And it was, what was remarkable about it, and again, you were such a big part of it, was how, in the spirit of Obama, who we were just with a moment ago as well, it was all these self-organizing communities coming together. It wasn't a top-down campaign. It was Prop 50, after all, 50 states. And our state of mind was about losing this republic, 250th anniversary, the best of the Roman Republic, best of Greek democracy, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, the rule of law, not the rule of Don. And it's increasingly, I think, dawning on all of us that for things to change, we have to change. And as a consequence of what we did, we're doing everything differently now, with a recognition how precious and profound this moment is. We can lose this republic. This guy is not screwing around. Let me highlight that. Brian, on the day we kicked off the campaign for Prop 50, It was at the Democracy Center in Little Tokyo. It's a sacred site in Los Angeles where we were interning, busing the Japanese. It's a sacred site. I underscore that because we had about 1,000 people at a rally, 2 U.S. senators, we had a dozen members of Congress, clergy, civil rights leaders to kick it off. And we looked outside. People were having a difficult time getting in. We're like, what's going on? They said, well, there's a bunch of masked men outside. We rolled our eyes. There's not masked men. There was one exception, a guy dressed up, I kid you not, as if he just came off the Burbank lot, Warner Brothers, in 1930s garb, including the haircut, guy named Bovino, Gregory Bovino, was out there with his private police force. Appeared to be private, no markings, no reference to who they're working for, an intimidation tactic to keep people from walking in. Poor guy selling, true story, strawberries across the street, disappeared that day. We finally tracked him back. He finally came back a few weeks later. Collateral damage. We said at that time, that is a preview of things to come. What more evidence do you need than what happened in Minnesota? Those guys clearly took an oath of office to Donald Trump, not the Constitution of the United States of America. On Election Day, again, if you think I'm overstating things, on Election Day, Bovino, Kristi Noem, Stephen Miller, the dark heart of the operation, sent out BORTAC teams. These are the Border Patrol tactical units with, these are the folks with the Apache helicopters. On election morning, sent them to the highest profile location you can find, particularly after the Dodgers win the World Series, to Dodger Stadium, to get all the morning news, to send a message to our diverse communities already on edge, because we had 4,000 National Guard federalized, 700 active duty Marines, not sent overseas, but the second largest city in the United States of America, to send a message, don't bother to turn out the vote. We said at the time that is a preview of things to come. Of course, that came after Donald Trump sent out a Truth Social even earlier that morning saying the election in California is rigged. He also sent out the Department of Justice. Pam Bondi sent out his teams, election watchers and observers. The next day tweeted out, we have the evidence. And they went to the Supreme Court. A preview of things to come. I kicked off this book tour in the South, in Tennessee. We were down in Fulton County. Met with the commissioners, head of the commission. Trump is not only did he take him with, all that team of folks, Tulsi Gabbard and everything else, he's now trying to impose to take over that commission for the election this year. A preview of things to come, to nationalize the election, or at least in 15 blue states. What's the SAVE Act all about? It's not about voter ID, it's about who gets to vote. It's about voter registration. This guy is not screwing around, and nor can we. And forgive the long-windedness, you opened up with Prop 50. That's what it represents. We have got to fight fire with fire. I wish it weren't the case. The idea that we were advocating for gerrymandering, the fact that we were advocating for literally politicizing and choosing voters, shows you how precious, again, and profound and consequential this moment is in our republic.
So you mentioned that that was a preview of things to come, and you repeated that line, and I think that that line is important to have repeated. Do you think that that's gotten through to everybody else in the Democratic Party? Because you also mentioned at the top that it is very of the Democratic Party to write an op-ed in the New York Times. I said to write a strongly worded letter, and that feels like the Democratic Party that I've always known. This idea that as long as we just kind of expect democracy to work or confer some degree of goodwill to the other side, that maybe it'll be reciprocated. Do you think that the gravity of this moment has gotten through to the rest of the party? Because not every governor in this country is going to be you or Maura Healey, We should be so lucky, but they're not. And so do you think it's gotten through?
It's getting through. Look, these guys are ruthless. We're trying to, again, win arguments. They're consolidating power. Enough. And the asymmetry is real. these propaganda networks, the primetime lineup at Fox, I'll just remind you, you know this, that Laura Ingraham herself is a partner in a business deal with Donald Trump Jr. I mean, it's Pravda. What's happening in Sinclair, One American News, Newsmax, the asymmetry in terms of their ability to flood the zone and communicate is extraordinary. And so again, for things to change, I'll keep saying it, we have to change. It's not what happens to us, it's how we respond to what happens to it. And so we need to change our tactics, and you're seeing it. We saw JB he did a remarkable job. We were just with him in Chicago in response to what happened, again, in the preview of what was to come in Chicago after what happened in D.C. And of course, you saw the same with Governor Walz. And I never thought, I'll tell you again, never thought I'd get a call like this. Just a few months ago, I get a call from Walz, and I'm like, how you doing, pal? He's like, hey, I thought it would be you first, he tells me. But it's me. I could use a little help. I said, whatever you need. He goes, for my legal defense fund. A sitting governor calling another governor, quite literally, to raise money because he's under criminal indictment by Donald Trump. So isn't the mayor? We forgot about that. These guys are not screwing around. You think for a second that's not likely to happen out on the West Coast? This is different. He's an invasive species. And so, if nothing else, Brian, it's awakening up our immune system. And it's so often the case, isn't it? I mean, it's, how many extraordinary moments you've had up here with historians and authors. It's always the case. It's the people first. Justice Brandeis, and the most important office is the office of citizen. It's not president, governor, mayor. Active, not inert citizenship. And you're seeing that at the No Kings rallies. You saw it in that second one. You saw it in the steel spines of the folks in Minnesota. That's why Trump's in retreat. That's why Kristi Noem was just fired. It was those folks, it was you, all of you standing up, meeting this moment. So, yes, I think we're getting the message. And there are a lot more messengers, and I think there's a lot more activity and action and passion in the spirit of Oliver Wendell Holmes that is being shared all across this country.
To what extent do you think that the fact Trump and his acolytes feel so emboldened to act the way that they are, that's born out of an unwillingness to hold them to account the first time?
Look, I think about, Trump is Trump, but, Speaker Johnson, Lindsey Graham, I thought the two most effective anti-Trump surrogates was a guy named J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. But you know this, and we've talked about this. I've gotten so frustrated that, I even put up a Patriot site. You can go online, and on my Patriot site, I sell knee pads. And the good news, Brian, is we have a new Trump signature series knee pads. The old ones sold out, just like our law firms are selling out, just like our universities are sold out, just like corporate leaders are sold out, just like members of the media have sold out. And they've got to be called out. I'm sorry. We'll lose this country. The complicity at this moment, trying to make a deal with Donald Trump. Or those that are also complicit, they're putting their head down and hoping it just all goes away. I mean, I just left Jesse Jackson's memorial, talking about this notion we have agency. We can shape the future. We're not bystanders of the future. The future's not in front of us, it's inside of us. It's decisions, not conditions, that determine our fate and future. That's the spirit, the vernacular. That's the spirit of Kennedy, the spirit of the 60s. It's how you solve for ignorance and poverty and disease. And so I think it's the spirit that defines this moment. So that complicity also needs to be called out much more aggressively, because at the end of the day, my summation of Trump is it's really not complicated. It's a corruption story. Everything connects to that, just like the tariffs. He had to come face to face with a co-equal branch of government. It was a bit of a shock, wasn't it? You saw that press conference last Friday or the Friday before, and it wasn't about our country as much as it was about his personal portfolio. And you think, again, I'm overstating it, just consider the tariffs dropped 26% in Vietnam right after the Vietnamese approved the $1.5 billion golf course in development. That's what the IEEPA meant to Trump. It's about his personal portfolio. And you say, well, hold on, that's not fair. Well, let's go to the UAE. Let's talk about the $2 billion there. World Liberty Financial. Let's talk about the high-valued chips that were sent in return for the $2 billion. This is a grift the likes of which we've never experienced in history of this country at a scale unprecedented. And all these guys want to get in on it. Every one of these foreign trips, who was the first envoys out there? Members of the family, people in business. What's this? Board of peace. It's about getting a piece of the Middle East. Come on. You got to call this out. It's not complicated. It's in plain sight. And there's a timidity. Bobby's language. The world needs are the qualities of youth, not a time of life, a state of mind, a quality of imagination, predominance of courage over love of ease. This notion of courage over love of ease at this moment. And so, again, forgive, my mom, I wrote about her in this book, who's passed away 20 years ago. She'd probably be washing my mouth out with soap. And forgive me, Mom. But I just feel like this moment requires us to radically shift. Conventional politics no longer applies.
To that end, I want to read an excerpt, and you and I have spoken about this particular excerpt before, and this was right in the lead up to the first same-sex marriage that you would be responsible for. And this is what one of your campaign consultants said to you, quote, speaking, while we're talking about cleaning your mouth out with soap, quote, "What the fuck are you doing here? Why did we work so hard to win if you can't do something bold?" he asked. "This is a short life, Gavin. Your time as a politician to get things done is just a blip." And so while we're talking about doing something bold, what does that look like in 2026 in very much the same way that when this took place decades ago, that was the bold movement?
Look, I mean, it's all about 2026. It's exhausting, this guy or gal on the white horse that's going to come save the day in 2028. It's all about 2026. There may not be a 2028 as we know it. There may not be. And again, there'll be an election. Competitive authoritarians love elections. Like Putin, you may Google this, I think it was 87.3%, I think is what he did. Yeah, someone got 4.3 or something below. That's the kind of election that we may have if we don't take back the House of Representatives and, dare I say now, take back the United States Senate this November, which is in play in a big, big way. And so and it goes to the, and I get the friction of what happened in 2004. And, we were barely even debating civil unions back then. And I took a leap of faith. And, Massachusetts was a big part of that as well. You did as well. I think we share that in so many ways in common. And it, was an audacious move, and there was a lot of critique and criticism and a lot of punditry, and it was a lot of soul searching for me, and I talk a lot about that. It was universally condemned by members of my party. My family, my dad tried to talk me out. I write about it in the book. There's a scene with he and my uncle, and they had an intervention the night before trying to talk me out of it. Old Irish Catholic family, West Side, San Francisco. Dad used to go and grew up down in the Marina District, and his mom and dad every morning got all 6 brothers and sisters dressed up to go to church every single day. This is not even the black and white movie days. It feels like yesterday. That was my father, and here was his son pursuing the dreams he never achieved. After trying to run for county supervisor and losing, turning around in 1968 and running for state senate and losing with the help then of Bobby Kennedy. We have these campaign photos. from that time. And he lost both races and was broke and broken and took off, leaving my mom, 19 when she had me, 2 years later with 2 kids on her own. Came back eventually, but wasn't there in the beginning. I was pursuing his unfinished work. And so I got elected as the youngest mayor in 100 years, and he's doing the Jimmy Gleason thing, how sweet it is. And I'm like, Dad, we should start marrying same-sex couples. Didn't go over very well, as you can imagine. There's a scene where I was debating it with him and this fierce advocate for justice, one of the nation's great trial attorneys, Joe Cachet, his best friend. And Joe was trying to debate me, as he does with everybody. And I said, Joe, I give up. I don't know what else to say except, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And that's literally when he turned to my dad and uncle, he said, boys, he'll be doing this tomorrow because it's the right thing to do. And we moved forward and married 4,036 couples from 46 states and 6 countries in that winter, not summer, of love in San Francisco. And it was glorious and extraordinary, but it was also extraordinary, the self-doubt that came with that afterwards, and sort of the reflection of my own complicity in sort of in the mega political moment, sort of the beginner's mind, the naivete perhaps I had of it. If I knew what I knew, I probably wouldn't have done it. And there's something about the beginner's mind, the Roger Bannister theory of life, the guy who broke the 4-minute mile because he didn't know he couldn't. Everyone else was an expert. They knew that the human body didn't move that fast. And so, I think what it represented, though, was conviction, to your question. I'm coming back to that. Whether you agreed or disagreed. And this notion of conviction is also a strength. And I think for our party, the last year, it's a sense our party, back again, I said a moment ago, is weak. And I was just with Bill Clinton and Hillary, and you remember what Clinton said years ago when we got shellacked at one of those midterms many moons ago. He said, given the choice, the American people always support strong and wrong versus weak and right. And there is something about just strength and conviction. Yes, we want to be strong and right. That's the sweet spot. But having the courage of your convictions, being able to get out there and sell them, be out there selling it every day, to flood the zone, to make the case, but to have the courage of your convictions to share that. And finding that equal weight, I think, is how not only we get back, though I'm confident in 2026, but we get back that mojo. I think that sense, and forgive me, I'm just, you guys, some of you know this, and my staff certainly know, this is like, you don't even know what I'm serious, like what being here for a guy like me, and I write about I don't read speeches because I can't read speeches, but I read, but I can't deliver speeches that I read, and just, how Sarge Shriver and Bobby and JFK, that's why I'm here. It's reflected in my father. And, so the fact that I'm here having this conversation is extraordinary. But I say all that to make this. What's so evocative of this is the thing that's the hardest thing. And I've tried this as mayor, as a county supervisor, as lieutenant governor. You can't legislate spirit. You can't legislate pride. And sort of the vernacular that defines this hollow ground and this notion of going on a journey together. And I just think that's the language we need again. This notion of going on a journey together, a journey where everyone sees themselves and they're part of it. And I think that's the spirit, that's strength. And that's not power, dominance, and aggression. That's not Trump's version of strength. That's the strength defined by the people that all the preachers we're talking about today. King and Gandhi and Mandela and Havel, Cesar Chavez, that shared their moral authority. It's about moral authority. And if we can use our moral authority, we'll gain back the formal authority. And I'm confident in not only 2026, but also 2028.
So you spoke about this idea of redefining what the Democrats stand for. Right now we're in a moment where it's kind of uncertain what the Republicans stand for, other than blind devotion to Trump. But I mean, this is a guy who himself had campaigned on this idea that he wanted to enter no new wars. Here we are in a new war every week. A guy who campaigned on bringing costs down. Thanks to his trade war, costs are surging. How do you think about what the Republican Party stands for moving forward, given the fact that they've been perfectly content to shed every purported ideal they've had in the lead up to this moment?
Well, they're supine. There's no Republican Party. Back to this invasive species construct. They don't exist. And it's remarkable. I mean, you have Ronald Reagan. I walk into Ronald Reagan's old office every day when I'm at work. Governor Ronald Reagan. I mean, he's looking down, literally, not just figuratively, his painting on Donald Trump in the Oval Office. It has nothing in common with this. I mean, this is a guy, Trump, who said he was going to make us wealthier and healthier. We're quite literally sicker and poorer. You saw the jobs numbers today, down 92,000. We lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 12 months, 1.4% GDP contract now starting to slow down. We saw one of the worst jobs growth years that we've had since recession, roughly 2013. Speaking of 13, I mean, it's not even 13 cents today. I saw it was 37 cents overall. Gas prices have increased week over week. And if you're in Indiana, it's 47 cents. West Virginia, 47 cents. In just 1 week, there was the energy minister in Qatar. They had their largest LNG facility that was just taken out, the second largest LNG exporter in the world. Their largest LNG facility was just taken out by an Iranian drone. And he talked about his words in the FT this morning, $150 a barrel of oil. You talk about wrecking ball presidency. I mean, certainly reflected symbolically and substantively in the imperial palace that he's trying to, the Kremlin West Wing that he's trying to recreate. And that's all this has. Donald Trump is, it's all about destruction, and destruction is not strength. He's not a builder. Sam Rayburn, you always remember years ago, it was like, who's this Rayburn guy? He says, well, he had a great quote. I always remember the quote when I was a kid. He goes, any jackass can, knock down a barn. It takes a skilled carpenter to build one. Forgive me, but Donald Trump is a jackass. I believe that. And it's the only thing it has in common anything. Institutions, truth, trust. I don't even get to Kennedy's stuff, but come on, let's go down the list. These guys are rewriting history, censoring historical facts. They want to bring us back to a pre-1960s world. America in reverse. LGBTQ rights, women's rights. I mean, we've seen it on civil rights and now voting rights across the board. It's happening in real time. That's why states matter. And I want to just thank your state governor for, I guess she must have written a book, because I think you must have learned, or she could have in the time that you spent together talking about that, but more how important she is and how important governors are. States are on the front lines of all of these battles, but we all are now in this consequential moment. And so, no, I do not know what Donald Trump stands for. Right now, he stands for Donald Trump. And that's at the essence of almost everything. And we've talked about the Epstein files, but I don't want to go down that dark hole. But that's also reflected in what that's all about as well. It's about him. Something about those files and him. You don't care about laying anybody out. So who is he protecting? We know. He's protecting himself.
There was a really interesting part of the book where you discussed your meeting with Donald Trump, going on a plane with him, having phone calls with him. What struck me about that part of the book is it didn't feel like, it felt like there was two distinct personas between the public one and the private one. And so can you speak a little bit about who he pretends to be in public, whether you think that there is some legitimacy behind that, and who he is in private?
I'll talk to you about who he tried to call on Air Force One. Oh, thank God she didn't answer. That would not have gone well. I'd have been kicked off the plane. I got a call. This There's a more contemporary call, and I'll go back briefly to what's in the book. In this book, by the way, if you were coming to get a book about 10-point plan to restore America's soul and future, and come back, that is definitely, you're at the wrong venue. That is not this book. If you came to read a book that was some sanitized version of a political life, this is not that book either. This is the Opry. This is, if you don't like me, you should buy this in bulk. With the one exception, I wrote a book that went up to when my father, God bless him, he lasted long enough to see his son get elected governor. He was in a wheelchair on election night, passed away a few weeks later. Didn't see me get sworn in, but boy, he was there. And what a night that was for me. And that's where the book was going to end. But the fires last year, I was going to release this last year in Los Angeles, required an extension of the book because I met Donald Trump as governor-elect after the most devastating and deadly wildfire in American history, Paradise, California, right before I got sworn in as governor, when Jerry Brown was governor of California. And I described that trip in detail. And it marks our relationship, which is an interesting one, and let me highlight that. The night before he federalized 4,000 National Guard, remember, that all happened in California first. So much of this is happening in California first. His efforts to try to get and purge the voting rolls happened in our state first, even before Pam Bondi demanded them as an extraction payment to get the National Guard, or rather get ICE out of Minnesota. They had already demanded that of us and a number of other states many, many months ago. Donald Trump demanded my attention on a night that I'll never forget. At 10:30, 11 o'clock, I'm getting this strange phone call, missed call, from someplace in Florida. And it just couldn't be, right? It's 10:30, I'm doing the math. I may have dyslexia, but I can still count, which I'd love to get into. Not the counting part, the dyslexia. And I texted Susie Wiles, and she goes, yes, call him. So I call her, and this was when we had a modest incident in Southern. They colored it in. It was an incident, legit, but they really covered it on, Hannity at Fox in Los Angeles. And Trump called me, presumably to talk about LA. I jump right into LA. He cuts me off, goes, what do you think of New Scum? His nickname for me. I'm like, New Scum. He goes, and then I'm about to say, he says, pretty original, right? Pretty original. I said, original? I said, not original. I literally told him, I said, I just wrote a book. There's an 8th grade bully that called me New Scum. It's in the book. And he goes, oh, no, He goes, well, what about MAGA? What about MAGA? I said, what about it? I said, are we seriously having this conversation? Literally, this is how it went. He goes, pretty good, right? I said, well, no, Reagan kind of had that too, and it's not original. He goes, well, how many hats do you think I sold last month? It is 1:30 in the morning, Mar-a-Lago time. I don't know how many True Socials he was in at that hour, but apparently he sold about 211,000 hats. I was like, well, that's actually impressive. And the whole conversation got even more curious. He said, he starts talking about how he won the debate against Kamala. I'm like, no, you didn't. And he said it was 4 against 1. And I said, I thought there was just only 2 hosts. He goes, well, the cameraman. So anyway, 17 minutes later, and by the way, if you think I'm making this up, there was an oversight committee that demanded my notes on this conversation. I literally am not making any of that up. About 18 hours later, the next day, there's a True Social saying, I read Newsom the Riot Act. And I am federalizing 4,000 National Guard. It was 2,000, then eventually 2,000. But what the hell is this? That's Donald Trump. That's the Trump in the book. That's the guy slapping me on the leg saying, in front of Jared Kushner, Kushner, you were not my first choice, Tom Brady was. right in front of Kushner. Gives a whole long story. I thought it was kind of a joke, and then I'm like, oh God, he's serious. Literally, you should read, if for nothing else, know your audience. You may want to read that. But he was trying to read me, and I was trying to read him. Sizing each other up. We're then, we land on Marine One, and Marines are walking up like this, and Trump hits me. He goes, I'm right there. Marines are about to open the door. He goes, Schwartzman doesn't get this. Some of you know who Schwartzman is. Guy he's always competed with to be as wealthy as Schwartzman. We get on Air Force One. He starts petting the side of the plane. He goes, isn't this amazing? I said, it's amazing, sir. You're amazing, sir. Is what he was looking for. We walk in the bedroom, and I'm like, no other president would ever do this. I don't know that I want to go in the bedroom with any other president. And it was really incredible. And then we went back and did a press conference, and I didn't know he could do press conference. And now you see it all the time. It was amazing. Called me the next day. I describe after I took a little shot on my inaugural, and he calls me, and he honestly, it's in the book. He expressed being almost hurt. I'm like, whoa. And I was ready to apologize. Said I didn't, it was just a oblique, yeah. And he goes, well, we're all good. We're good. And then he starts talking about my family and my kids, and said something you shouldn't say about someone's wife. That's Donald Trump. And every foreign leader knows this. You can spin them on your finger. The most easily manipulated. It's alarming. It's alarming. And so it's all about that transaction. It's all about that relationship. He's a broken man that tried to break this country. It's not complicated. And that's why, again, we have to remain vigilant, because this is a guy he's been exposed, weakness masquerading as strength. With respect, and forgive me, but between he and Bessent, it's Dumb and Dumber right now. These guys, this thing is collapsing all around us. I live in the Mag 7 West Coast. That's kind of holding up this whole market, all the CapEx. I'm out there in a state where his state of mind is to take 10% tithing from Intel. I remember Ronald Reagan out there with, Thatcher talking about, free enterprise is a healthy horse pulling a sturdy wagon. Now it's state capitalism. 25% AMD, 25% NVIDIA, MP Materials, golden shares, or a golden iPhone to avoid a drop in your shares by getting a tariff exemption. This is different. And so that relationship that was formed then allowed me to navigate during COVID in a way where we actually got along remarkably, and allowed me to navigate up into that phone call. But when he drew that line, and it felt like he declared war on an American city in Los Angeles last June, that's when I recognized I had to radically change. And you saw it, and forgive me, back to, soap in the mouth, washing it out. My social media shifted as well. And if you haven't noticed, not many people were applauding then. But I just thought I'd put a mirror up to this. How has this been allowed to be normalized, this normalization of deviancy? How are we not calling this all cap out? How can he cosplay, literally dress up as the Pope? Like dressed up as the Pope. Dressed up as Superman. He put his picture up there on Mount Rushmore, so I decided to start doing it as well. And so offended was the primetime lineup at Fox. So offended was the 5. How could a governor do this? It's so unbecoming. Jesse, what do you say? So situationally unaware of how complicit they all have been at this moment. we don't want to be in peril, being judged not to have lived in this moment. And so all of us, we need to put that mirror up. We need, otherwise we put a mask on and our face is going to grow into it. We won't even recognize ourselves, not just our country. And we can do it with a little sense of humor. And I think with Trump, going to your point, and again, forgive the long-windedness, there's a sort of, back and forth. He's got a sense of humor, remarkably personable. I spent 90 minutes with him in the Oval Office after I, uninvited, though I finally got invited, I kind of pushed myself onto the tarmac in LA, where he was very gracious. And I invited myself to the Oval Office a month later, and it was 90 minutes of sort of banter back and forth. But I realized, and we all do, you don't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I have no interest in working for Donald Trump. That's the red line that will never be crossed.
While we're on the subject of weird relationships, Kimberly Guilfoyle.
Okay. Oh, geez.
Look,
Y'all seem to know a lot more about that than most things. That's interesting. Yeah.
I have spent the last week trying to figure out what the question would be here. I know that I wanted to ask a question.
You must have had something to drink. That took some courage to bring this up.
Well, I didn't see Jen, so I figured it would be okay
my
to
wife's
ask.
not here.
So I don't
by
really
the
know
way,
what...
just on that, so I can try to distract him. And he may forget the question he was about to ask. So we're on Air Force One. I get the Royal Tour. It was amazing. He was incredibly gracious. He really was. And he was treating everyone rather graciously as well. It was sort of a mark of interesting character trait that I've never seen and haven't seen since, in terms of how he treated, the pilots and everybody and how gracious he seemed to be with the staff. But he really wanted me to call my wife. And I don't know any, some of you maybe had the privilege. I had never been on Air Force One. I figured you just pick up the phone and dial. That doesn't work. There's some operator, back like some old day movies. And I'm like, oh gosh, not Jen, not my wife. She was not happy I was with Trump. And he's standing right above me, waiting for the operators to say, sir, we have Jen Newsom on the phone. And we waited. I'm like, okay. Well, we're watching Fox News, and and I'm like, sir, she's not available. I'm like, oh, that's really too bad. That's, luckily I ended up having to call. He said, call someone else. I ended up calling my sister, and he got bored with me and walked away. I said, Hillary, thank you. You're good? Good, thanks, bye. Forgive me, but you were saying about Kimberly.
So, on the topic of unfortunate relationships, how, was she always, is this an act? How did this happen? I mean, the gulf between you and her.
Yeah. Well, I'm a young man in a hurry. She was a young woman in a hurry. She, pretty fierce prosecutor, was in LA, made her way to San Francisco. A lot of cross currents with Kamala and the DA's office. I mean, it's interesting. And, I was sworn in as mayor the same day Kamala was sworn in as DA. We walked across the street for her swearing in. And, we were all in this sort of friends group. Frenemies group, not with Kamala, but with Kimberly and Kamala. And she was a very effective prosecutor. And there's a famous dog mauling case where court TV was starting to assert itself. And she was on there a number of times because she was prosecuting that case with a co-prosecutor, a deputy DA, and it was a very high-profile case. It was getting a lot of national attention, and she started getting a lot of national attention. And she seemed quite gifted on TV, so much so that Roger Ailes eventually called her after she went to work part-time for court TV and then part-time, full-time at Fox. I just got elected mayor. She just gets the job from Ailes. That's not a relationship that's going to last. But she always had that prosecutorial energy. She had an amazing father. Mom died very young from Puerto Rico, dad from Ireland. And he was just this, just blue collar, worked for PG&E, just hard work, contractor, part-time, and just raised his two kids after his wife died very young to be tough. That's who she is. But talking about a mask, you don't get to go on Fox for very long without putting that mask on, and that face grows into it pretty quickly. And that's what happened from my perspective. And then she, presumably, I guess they must have fallen in love, Donald Trump Jr., where they were engaged, and you just can't make that up. Former First Lady of San Francisco engaged to, and as we're going back and forth. So it's been a hell of a, it's not easy to talk about these things. And it was a hell of a thing trying to edit what I wanted to say about this in the book, knowing that my wife was likely to read it. So but I write about it, and I try to be honest about it. And I also, I'm married in the church, you feel like a failure. And this book is about failure. It's about setbacks. It's not about triumphs. It's about mistakes. It's about, it's hardly about, perfection. I think if there's anything, maybe it's about perseverance. It's about discovery. A young man in a hurry, became a memoir of discovery, the subheadline, because I wrote a book that I couldn't go back and talk about my life to my mom and dad because they were no longer here. And so I had to go back and I had to start to learn about things I never knew about them, secrets they never shared, including why they got divorced. I found out about that in the process of writing the book. They never told me why they got divorced. I never understood why my father left. I never understood my mom's relationship to her father who took his life, who was a prisoner of war, a corregidor, who put a gun to her head when she was very young, threatening to kill her in a fit of rage of alcoholism. Again, eventually taking his own life. I never understood that connection. I never understood how that shaped her and how that shaped me and who I am today. Single mom, working 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs. And by the way, I describe them in detail, that none of that is exaggerated. Who we had in our house our entire life, there was always a stranger there because we were renting out rooms. We were a foster family growing up. Just hard work, single moms, just single moms. Oh my, single moms. All the single moms out here. And so in many ways, this became a love letter to her. The things I could never say to her because she's not around, she never met my kids. I talk about the day Trump called me. There was a moment, oh God, you think about your mom, those moments. The inaugural. As a kid that struggled and still does with dyslexia, and again, back to my inability to look down and read speeches, and how I felt like I was dumb, and there was plenty of evidence to back that up, and how my mom struggled with a son who's struggling. And, she told me some piercing words that I write about in the book where she said, it's okay to be average. And that did not sit well with me. And in the process of writing, I realized she was just saying it's okay. And in the process of writing this, I forgave her. And I keep forgiving. And so it's a journey, but it came to just intense terms the day of the inaugural. And I'm reading the only thing I can read, which is a teleprompter speech. And it's, these are not memorable speeches, my teleprompter speeches. I'm sort of fixed on the words. But I noticed the audience was not fixated on anything I was saying, because in the corner, I'm seeing this shadow running around. My 3-year-old, who was sitting in the front row with his pacifier and his blanket, Dutchie. And the crowd is kind of laughing a little bit, and he's running away from my wife. My wife's in a panic, people all paying attention, and he runs right up on stage as I'm speaking and bolts right to my leg. And I'm looking at the teleprompter, and with our first 100 days, we will, and people are like, and I look down, I'm like, and I, of course, pick him up. And then what does he do? He puts his head right. I mean, you can look this up. And I have to give the speech with my son. And I swear to you, to this day, there's never been a speech people are like, I want that speech again. Because they don't remember a damn thing that I said. It was just the way everyone felt. And and the way I felt at that moment, I was thinking, oh, if mom could see this. That's all she wanted for her son. that connection, and so this book is about opportunity to make up for that. My dad never had that. My dad was amazing. I love my dad, and I've never, ever doubted he loved me. Came back to my life much later. Was a huge part of my life, but he never had that. Was here maybe, but was never here. The baritone of your life. And that kind of love is, to me, the most important. That's what this book is about. All the mistakes I made and how I'm trying to make up for them. I'm trying to be a better person. This young man in a hurry was too focused on himself. It was all about me, me, me. And one of the most profound moments where that just came crashing was when my mom, and I write about this in the book, where I get a voice message, and it's my mother. Hi, it's your mother. You may want to see me before next Thursday, because that will be my last day. Of course, I immediately then call my sister. What's going on? And she says, well, what's going on is you're not paying attention to anything. You're out there running around. You've got this little small business. You think you're all that as a county supervisor, and you haven't been paying attention to Mom. Breast cancer's come back. I said, oh, I know that. She goes, no, it's come back. I said, but she's going to be fine. She got this past a year ago. She came over it. She goes, no, she's doing an assisted suicide next Thursday. And by the way, it was illegal in California at the time. And I know this is an issue. Trust me, I know the audience. I get it. And I didn't understand it. And so I had to come to grips with kind of jerk I've been, running around all about me, 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 and to spend those last precious days with her. But I had to spend the last precious minutes and seconds with her. Courageous doctors willing to lose his license. And everybody said their goodbyes. They're in the living room. My sister and I are just with our mom. And she's looking through all the old photos, those sort of 70s patina photos. And the medicine's starting to, doctor left, medicine's starting to, and my sister's crying, I'm crying, and my sister looks at me, I'm like, go, it's okay. And she bolts out. And I'm stuck there, I'm like, I don't know that I can do this much longer, but she's still with us. And I'm holding her hand, and those last breaths, nothing romantic about this. I mean, talk about scars, like scars, that last breath. And then I just put my head down on her stomach for about 20 minutes, and I said all the things I didn't even have the courage to say 20 minutes before, just feeling the shame of that. And it was just this wake up, like, who the hell am I becoming? This is not why she lived and died, for this guy. And so this is what this book's about. I'm scrutinizing my life, all the mistakes, all the insecurities, all the anxieties I have sitting up here with you today that mark who I am. And I'm just trying to be a better person throughout all this. And by the way, just something that may or may not resonate with you, what a gift it was. You know, my first year as governor, to sign a bill in her memory, allowing it to be legal in the state of California, to at least allow the grace of that journey that is unique for everybody. And I trust me, grew up in the church. I get it, how raw that is. So that's a little bit of the journey I've been on. And Kimberly was part of that journey, sincerely. Donald Trump's a big part of that journey. You know, trials and triumphs. It's just, you know, it's who we are. It's being human. Let it go. Just let it go.
You know, I think so much of the book was about those fits and starts, and there was so much awkwardness. You were really awkward for a lot of it. But I think the one part of the book that felt different was when you were describing your relationship with Jen. And in that part, it was the only part I noticed. Like, and I sat up while I was reading this part, because that part flowed so effortlessly in a way that the rest of the book didn't. And I think that's, you know, inherently because that part is the part that worked. And so I think that stuck out. And I think it's worth saying that, because
I love that.
Because I did like both.
Because when you see Jen, she's gonna, you know,
yeah. That's why. So let the record show.
Blind date. When you give up, you're like, no, I'm never. You know, it's like such a cliche. There's a reason cliches are cliches. And it was a blind date. She's 2 hours late. I'm like, it's like what was tonight? And I'm like, it's not going to work. And I was like, okay, hold on. And we spend platonic time together. And everything's perfect. See her a couple days later. And then she says, I'm a Republican. I'm like, oh, come on. Everything about you is perfect. And she goes, well, it's just because my father is a Republican. And he still is. And she starts talking to me about her life and her story and her journey and how she lost her older sister to an accident and how it shaped her. And she starts, you know, her journey, which I write about, and she was sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein. And then assaulted again by a lawyer defending him. Disgraceful lawyer. Tried to intimidate and shame her. Disgraceful. No amount of money. The devil's advocate. I'll never forgive him for that. The courage of young women that do that. And she's a fierce warrior for women and girls. She's a feminist, and she's been out there. She did a documentary called Misrepresentation that Oprah bought about the mis and underrepresentation of women and girls decades ago. I'm so proud of her. But there's a spirit in her because of what she went through. And I describe it, and I love that you bring this up. I describe watching her dance, the first time I saw her dance. Oh, and this freedom. I mean, you see something, it's like, we talk about love, and all my West Coast friends, you know, love and light. And you're like, I don't understand that. And then I see it. I'm like, oh, love and light. And she's just a bright light. And, you know, she set me straight. She didn't know. She's like, I love your dad. She got to know my dad, but she's like, are you going to be like your father was as a husband? She had to go through the Kimberly stuff. She had to deal with a lot of that afterwards. And we established that. Then she wondered, well, are you going to be your father again when it comes to our children? And so she took a leap of faith with me. And so if I didn't describe her well, that's an injustice. And she is the rock, and she's the constant. I'm so in love, and I'm so lucky. And she gave me the most precious things in the world that are the four that I dedicate this to. Brooklyn Dutch, Hunter, and Montana. And as I dedicate to them, may they continue this story.
I want to finish off with the question I get asked the most when I see people, and I'm sure a question that you have to face a lot when you talk to people, and that is, are we going to be okay? And so I want to take this opportunity, while I'm sure there's a lot of people in this audience, a lot of people who are going to be watching online, who watch what we're contending with right now, see the ways in which our democracy is failing, our justice system is failing us, and obviously the apathy that we contend with among our voter base as well. And what do you say to folks who ask, are we going to be okay?
What a perfect question, because it was expressed all day today at the memorial. We were talking about Ayers, we're talking about Malcolm X, we're talking about King, we're talking about Kennedy. We're talking about the 60s, how we were torn asunder in so many ways, shapes, or form, even the early 70s. And, I come from a city, San Francisco, 1906 earthquake and fire, and our flag is the phoenix rising from the ashes. That's the resilience we have as a nation, our capacity for renewal, rebirth. It's alive in all of us. I mean, it's alive in all of you. You haven't gotten the memo that you shouldn't be here for yourself or each other. You haven't dialed into the cynicism, the fear, and the anxiety. You've had all this stacking of stress, that grace you haven't even given yourself. This original book, by the way, this was not supposed to be a memoir. I submitted this to Penguin Press and the great Anne Godoff, and she rejected my book. And I thought she was going to reject it because I had one chapter about my childhood, and the rest of it was about COVID and social unrest, supply chain issues, and my first 2 years with Trump and 2 years with Biden. She goes, I want the memoir. And so I had to rewrite a brand new book. But in the old book, I talk about our resiliency. And I talk about how we haven't given ourselves the grace to really reflect on everything you guys have been through and gotten through. Just in the last 5 or 6 years, I would say since the escalator with Trump. But what many of you have lived through going back decades and decades, what our grandparents lived through, what my grandfather lived through as a prisoner of war, what my great-great-grandfather lived through, during the Red Scare, and I write about his relationship to Oppenheimer and Linus Pauling, he was his doctor, and all of that, and all the FBI files. It echoes today. And we're here. We've had triumphs, not just tragedies, since then. And so I'm deeply optimistic. But again, it's in that spirit of, the spirit of today that moved me. It's, as we pray, move our feet, right? It's faith and works. We just can't, I love the candlelight vigils, but not right now. I'm sorry. We've got to fight fire with fire. We've got to be as ruthless, but lovingly, as they are. They're not screwing around. They're trying to break this country. They're trying to break us. Shock and awe, flooding the zone, dominating the nerve. That's Trump's great strength, is sussing up your weakness and exploiting it 24/7. He loves our indignation. He loves our outrage. All sort of folks on the dictatorial spectrum love that. But they don't like the mockery. They don't do well with humor. Trump struggled a little bit with our social media. It's gotten under their skin as we put that mirror up to their face. And so you've all inspired us. This imperial presidency that's having a birthday party with a military parade, that's putting his beautiful photograph on the side of the DOJ, Bobby's building, putting his name in gold everywhere. Again, that's weakness masquerading as strength. And you are showing up. And you keep showing up over and over and over and over and over again. And we're going to show up just like they did in Texas in record numbers this week. We're going to show up in record numbers this November. And we're going to celebrate Speaker Jeffries with the gavel. And we're going to celebrate the beginning of the renewal and rebirth of our country.
Governor Gavin Newsom.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for taking the time and still being here this late in the evening.